gathered here because you're being initiated into Phi Beta Kappa. What I want to do now is to introduce you to the society. Our handbook puts the official purpose of the organization very well. Let me quote from the handbook. For over 200 years, election of Phi Beta Kappa has been a recognition of intellectual capacities well employed, especially in the acquiring of an education in the liberal arts and sciences. And that is what the organization stands for. And it's selected within that. Overall, we're limited to inducting 10% of each class, and juniors only 1%. They're part of the 10% then. We're concerned with grades, of course, but in addition to grades, we look for a well-rounded course of study, the sort of person who doesn't just take a course in his or her major, or just in the arts, or just in the sciences. In some ways, we consider ourselves one of the bastions of the liberal arts, true and broad liberal arts education at Brandeis, and I hope we do serve that purpose. Well, that's what we are. But if you look back at the history of Phi Beta Kappa, you see a subtext, and this subtext suggests that we are, of all things, a fraternity, a frat. And since 1875, when women began to be admitted, we are also a sorority. Today, we're just sort of a fraternity or a sorority, but at the beginning, that's just exactly what we were. Phi Beta, I guess we should call it that in a fraternity context, was founded on December 5th, 1776, at William and Mary in Virginia. So we're only 5 months younger than the United States. Appropriately for a frat, we were founded in a bar. It was called a tavern then, of course, but it was a bar, in the Apollo Room of the Raleigh Tavern in Williamsburg, Virginia. You can visit it if you go to Williamsburg. And it was actually the first frat in what has come to be called the Greek system. Among other things, it used Greek letters to identify itself. In this case, the letters stood for the first letters of our motto, Philosophia, Viu, Kubernetes, love of wisdom, the guide of life. Officially, Phi Beta Kappa was organized as a secret society for debate and composition, and at its early meetings there were indeed debates and discussion. I guess all frats need a raison d'etre. The ones that we have today, I gather, are organized for community service. But Phi Beta had social functions too, and the early meetings took place in the tavern, which records indicate were well used. At the same time, Phi Beta also had other characteristics of the Greek system: an oath of secrecy, a special handshake, which, by the way, don't ask me after, which I was never taught if it ever existed at all. It's maybe just an urban legend. A badge, the famous Phi Beta Kappa key, mottos, a code of laws, a seal. There's even legend that there was a secret motion to identify members to each other, which was this, wiping the beer from the... Since I had to speak at a fraternity initiation, I thought back in other fraternity initiations I'd heard of. I was never one of myself, except Phi Beta Kappa, but the ones I'd heard about, an animal house, I guess you've all seen it. I remember paddling was the main feature of the initiation of the Omegas, the evil house. I recall another fraternity where the initiation was that the people would be branded. Here's what one later initiator didn't allow it to be done to him, wrote, "Even today I feel a great deal in common with every man who knows our secret handshake and sings our sacred solemn songs. Yet when I see their horseshoe-shaped brands that they received at initiation, I sometimes have to fight back a pang of guilt when I look at my own bare skin." Well, we won't brand you, we won't even paddle you. When we initiate at the end of the ceremony, I'm sure we'll do something and hopefully that you can all agree with. Back to the history, Phi Beta, the first chapter lasted 4 years. By then it had 77 meetings and had enrolled 50 members. The first chapter closed when General Cornwallis marched on Virginia during the Revolution, and William and Mary closed. However, by then, chapters had been set up at other universities. Chapters were called alphas, again, a very fraternity-sounding name. The first alpha after William and Mary was Alpha of Connecticut at Yale in 1780, and the second Alpha of Massachusetts at Harvard in 1781. So we have really a long tradition going back. So much for our origins. The most important change that took place in the 19th century was that Phi Beta Kappa became an honor society. And this was done by the way, partly to set aside from the other fraternities that were being turned into what became the Greek system. The other crucial thing that happened in the 19th century was that we really became a meritocratic honor society quite ahead of its time, when women were admitted as full members in 1875 with all privileges and membership, which is quite early for that sort of thing. In the 19th century, new chapters began to be given names with the designation of the Greek letter in the order that they were admitted in each state. As I said earlier, all chapters were called alphas. Now, alpha became the name of the first chapter in a given state. So, Alpha of Massachusetts, the first was Harvard that I mentioned, became Alpha of Massachusetts, and Beta of Massachusetts was Amherst, which became formed a chapter in 1853. When Brandeis was admitted, it was in 1962, and we became the Mu chapter of Massachusetts. I should say here that the chapter at Brandeis in 1960 was founded more shortly after the founding of the university than at any other school in Phi Beta Kappa history. Only 14 years after Brandeis was founded, we had our Phi Beta Kappa chapter. We're very proud of this. It's often said, and I think with considerable justice, that this is a sign of how quickly Brandeis became a great university in an amazingly short span of time. Phi Beta Kappa chapter set up so quickly. Today, nationwide, there are about 275 chapters, which is interesting, which means that even having a chapter is quite select. It's about 10% of schools of higher learning in the United States, and within each school, only 10% can be admitted. So approximately only 1% of undergraduates at Brandeis are elected to Phi Beta Kappa nationwide. So it's really selective. Nonetheless, 6 United States presidents have been members elected. Others have been made honorary members. 6 American presidents have been elected in the course of their undergraduate careers in the normal fashion. They are John Quincy Adams, Chester Arthur, Theodore Roosevelt, William Howard Taft, George Bush Sr., and Bill Clinton. There are about 500,000 living members. Phi Beta Kappa Society is the name of the organization nationwide, and it has headquarters in Washington, D.C. The organization sponsors programs of visiting scholars to colleges and gives awards. It also publishes things. The most famous thing is the magazine The American Scholar, named for a famous address given by Ralph Waldo Emerson in 1837 as an oration at the Phi Beta Kappa at the Alpha of Massachusetts chapter at Harvard. There's also a newsletter, The Key Reporter. After the initial ceremony, you won't be charged for anything ever again you don't want to buy, and you'll always get the Key Report for free for the rest of your lives. So for that reason alone, keep the national headquarters apprised. They have your address now, but if you change your address, keep them apprised. You'll keep getting the Key Reporter. You can attend future Phi Beta Kappa meetings wherever you find yourself. And as graduate students and perhaps as faculty, you may want to join in the activities of the chapter at your school. The main activity is electing new members. That's it's an ongoing. That's the main activity, just picking up new members. So when you get down to it, I guess we're still a fraternity sorority, but now dedicated to things intellectual, and so in a sense we haven't changed that much since 1776. Let me mention the Phi Beta Kappa key. You've seen it perhaps, you can buy it. The design goes back actually to the beginning of the organization with the 2 fingers on it and the motto and the Greek letters. It goes back to 1776. When I started, when I joined Phi Beta Kappa in the 1950s, half a century ago, I guess now, people wore their Phi Beta Kappa key at school, and when they graduated, one sees less of it now. In fact, one almost never sees it. Still, perhaps not wearing the Phi Beta Kappa key is somehow a decline in intellectual atmosphere and commitment and intellectual pride. One wonders if President George Bush Sr., President Clinton, and Senator Clinton all wore their Phi Beta Kappa key. I don't know what would happen. It would be very interesting. Now, of course, wearing it would be considered weird or square. It was always square, let me admit. Square is now square. But still, a generation ago, it had a place in the order of things. Maybe you could begin to wear it again, turn things around, recreate that tradition. Let me say, for years I've been saying this. It's never happened. And I'm not wearing the key, so if I was running for president, I would. The point I want to make is that once you're a member of Phi Beta Kappa and get the feel for it, you will realize that all through life, as you run into others who are members of the society, it will create a bond between you, really like fraternity or sorority in that sense, though this one has criteria that we can all agree upon. And you will be surprised, I'd say, how interesting, intelligent, logical, and often nice you'll find your fellow members, the sort of people with whom you can discuss any topic without getting red in the face. Very good people. Keep an eye out for each other and help each other out. Look out for one another. Let me end then simply by saying that membership in Phi Beta Kappa is a real mark of excellence and the highest honor that you can get in an undergraduate career in the United States. Congratulations and welcome.